Welcome to Chris Horner's Corner. In today's episode, I want to talk about the power meter on your bike and why it's so important. Now, for my bike, for this demonstration, I've used SRM Power, and I've used it since 2009 when I was with Astana. Now, originally, when Johan Bernil gave me the power meter, I didn't want to use it. I was like, nah, I'm completely against it. I had, for a short, very, very short period, had a power tap the year before. Hated the unit, didn't like it, didn't know how to use it. One day I'm out doing the group ride, it popped off my handlebars and I didn't even stop to pick it up. That was ended up being one of the best training rides I had for the 3-week period that I'd had that power tap on my bike. Then 2009 rolled around, and like I said, Johan Bernil gave everybody a power meter on the team and he expected everybody to use it, and I was kind of against it, but okay, I put it on there, go out for the day one and training, and the power meter just goes blank, it stops working. I looked over at my teammate, I'm like, this thing doesn't even work. My teammate looked over at me as we're riding side by side at training camp in New Mexico. We were in Albuquerque. He looks over at me, he's like, did you charge it? I was like, what? You gotta charge it? To say that I'm electronically challenged is a small way to put it. I'm worse than that. So I didn't know you had to charge it. We finished the training ride, went back and charged it, and for the rest of the training ride there in Albuquerque, when I was with Astana, I was using the power meter. Still didn't like it, didn't want it on there, didn't believe in it, and I got into the race season and still kind of hated it. And then we're at Tour of California, which was early in the season, this particular time in 2009, and I ended up getting the flu or some kind of sickness that went through half of the peloton there. And one moment when I'm really, really suffering hard, and I thought, man, maybe I need to drop out. I'm really bad. And then I looked down my power meter and it read 400 watts, and I thought, oh, I'm not that bad, we're just going really fast. But I couldn't really tell at the moment, because from when you're sick, you just couldn't tell what's really hurting you. Is it being sick? Is it power? And once I started learning how to use the power meter and its advantages, I thought, wow, power's quite spectacular. Now, a lot of times, what really is good about the power meter too is if you have a personal coach. If you got a personal coach, you guys speak the same language. Numbers and math is the same language no matter what planet you're on, right? The distance is the same. They might call it something different, but distances decide everything. Math numbers decide everything. It's all in the math. Everything's in the math, right? And so when you're talking to your coach, whether if you're both speaking English, when you're speaking English to each other, you may not be speaking the same language. You might say, hey, I felt fantastic today. And your coach goes, well, what does that mean? You told me you felt fantastic yesterday, but today's numbers look worse than yesterday. Well, that's where the power meter really comes into play. It clears up all of the communication gap between yourself and your coach. Or if you don't have a coach and you're just using your power meter, it tells you exactly how you're feeling each day. So I always, after that tour of California, from that moment on, started to really enjoy what the power meter can do for you and what it's telling you. But I also have a whole lot of belief that the power meter is never there to train you. It's just there to tell you how your training's going. And a lot of people use the power meter in the wrong way. Their coach or their own belief is they're going to go out and today they're going to do 225 watts all day and they're going to try to average that. But maybe they don't feel good that day, but they still push to do 225 because their coach knows that you can do 225 on a good normal day, healthy day. You know, remember, the body's not like your car. You go in, you turn the key on your car, it's a machine, so it performs almost the same way every day, unless, of course, something's wrong with your car. But if everything's functioning correctly, your car will perform almost identical from day to day, assuming temperatures outside are the same and yada, yada, yada. But your body is all over the place. So when you're using your power meter, it's always there just to tell you how your training's going. Now, I told you guys earlier that I've been doing a bunch of training this part of the season. We're talking about January 2024. Now we're into February. So I was down in San Diego on vacation through December, trained a bunch, almost most of the days through December. Probably missed 3 days total in that whole month, and then continued to train through January and slowly kept bumping it up and bumping it up. So the last 9 days, I'll put up the picture there of what I've been doing the last 9 days. And if you look at 7-day period in there, there's about over 450 miles for the week. last 7th day of that week when I'm averaging, on the end of the ride, I averaged just over 225 watts. I believe it was 227. I hit the last climb that's to my house. It's probably a 5-minute climb or something thereabouts. And back in the day when I was pro, I'd hit this climb at the end of a 100-mile ride, go up this climb 400, 450 watts, hit 500 at the top, no problem. But if you look at the power files on the ride from 2 days ago, after the end of the ride, when I'm at about 100 miles and I'm coming up the last climb, really I could only hold about 250 watts. I was really tired. The overall average power of that day's ride was pretty good. I was pretty happy with that at 227 watts. But once I hit the last climb, the legs had fallen off the wagon and I was crippled going all the way up the climb and barely, like I said, doing 250 watts, maybe 225 at times for the last little climb up to my house. Then today, that's why I'm still wearing my kit. I was excited at the end of the ride today because now I could start feeling the form was starting to change from that ride 2 days ago. And I go out today and first 50 miles of the ride, I averaged 247, 245 watts for the first 50 miles of the ride. After that, I backed off the throttle just a little bit for the next 50 miles, and then when I'm getting into the house and I hit the last climb, same as I did 2 days before, going up the last climb and I'm well over 300 all the way up the last climb, but also above 300, but feeling good. So when you're looking at your power meter, remember, it's never there to train you. I don't ever believe that you should look at a power meter and say, today I meant to do this kind of power, I have to do this kind of power. What I take the power meter is to tell me what I'm doing, and then you have to mix the power meter with how you're feeling. Now, a lot of people believe power and heart rate. If you're talking to your coach, power and heart rate are important numbers because your coach can tell from your heart rate possibly how you're feeling. I believe when you're training yourself, the most important two numbers is power and your sensation on how you feel. Now, for example, back in the day when I was riding with Radio Shack, I go out for a long ride. It's about a 110 mile ride back in the day, and I averaged 254 watts, I believe it was. Went and started the Tour de France, had great form. Now, half the year goes by, it's January, going out and doing that same ride. Before the Tour de France, the year before, when I got home, I'd thrown the power meter, my SRM power meter head unit over to my wife, and she'd seen the 254 numbers. So she was familiar with what I'd done 6 months earlier. Now it's January, it's the next new season. I've been training good, I'm on good form. I throw the power meter to my wife after doing the exact same ride that I did 6 months earlier before the Tour de France, and I had about 2 watts more, so I was like 256 for a 110 mile ride with hard climbing. It was solid power the whole time. My wife looked at it and she said, wow, your numbers are better than it was 6 months ago, right before we went and did the Tour de France. And I looked at my wife and I said, yeah, but the difference was 6 months ago I could do 254 watts, and I could have done it the next day, the day after that, the day after that, and the day after that, because it was that 254 watts, and then the feeling I had at the end of that ride and the feeling I had the next morning that told me that, wow, that number was really good, because not only were the numbers impressive throughout the ride, but the next day I felt like I could have done it again and again and again and again afterwards. And that's what makes a difference is between Grand Tour riders and one-day riders, is Grand Tour riders have to produce numbers back-to-back for 3 weeks over and over again, and you want to try to avoid having those one bad days. But the power meter, what it said at 256, although it looked better to my wife, I knew at the time that my legs were about ready to fall off, and I just pushed a little bit too hard, and I need 3 days to recover from that. So when you're looking at the power meter, it's very good if you have a personal coach and you believe in what your coach is telling you to work around that power meter if he's telling you some numbers. But remember, the power meter is never there to train you. It's there first to go off of feeling, and then it's there to tell you that, hey, I feel good at this power with these sensations at the end of the day. But never use the power meter to train you. If you think you have to do 300 watts and you're pushing beyond yourself and you can't progress to go to the next day's training ride, that's when you start having a negative effects using the power meter. But the SRM is absolutely a beautiful tool, and I think everyone should have it that's really interested in trying to perform each day. Now remember, some guys have the opposite effect because maybe the power meter's not showing so good, so mentally it might bring them down some. But when you're trying to always perform well, it's a fantastic tool to use and have in your tool chest because it will tell you exactly how you feel as long as you can mix it with your feelings. You have to be like, wow, I feel good. The power number says I'm good. And I know when I go to the Tour de France, when I go to one of the Grand Tours, when I go to one of the monuments, that at the end of the race, at the end after 6 hours of racing, you got to produce. At my size of a rider, at 138 pounds that I raced when I was professional, you have to produce over 400 watts and more like 600 watts at the beginning of the climb when they're accelerating and attacking. And then you got to hold something around 4 to 430 watts. So you know when you're out training and you look at your power meter and you're 5 hours, 6 hours into the ride and you're going up the final climb before you get back to your house and you're doing 450 watts up the final climb, you're ready to go to the bike race. And that story will transfer, whether if you're a pro rider, it'll transfer to the amateur ranks, it'll transfer to the master ranks, it'll transfer to just about any race you're doing because everybody's level is about the same. So when you're doing a master's race or you're doing an amateur race, you know that these guys are capable of doing 350 watts, maybe it is. So when you get done with your ride, you always know if you're getting better. Now, of course, right now, I'm no longer pro, tearfully so, but that's the fact of the matter. I'm 52 years of age, and when you look at the last 9 days of training, you can see in my power there, sometimes I'm 190, then I start getting into the 200s, then I start getting into the 210s for the average power, then I start getting up to the 220, 227 2 days ago, and now of course I finished the ride at 235, but the first 2 hours was about 245, 247 for the first 2.5 hours, 50 miles of ride. So you know at the end of the ride, and I'm up here delivering this video to you guys directly after the ride, I had a croissant and a glass of water and I jumped up here, I'm still in my kit. So you know from how I look on the video camera right now, and I'm telling you how I feel, and then you look at the power, it was a good day. Everything I've done since December when I started training down in San Diego, when I continued it here in January, now in the February, the form has been progressing. It's been going upwards the whole time, always being careful of how much power I'm putting out and always being careful about what it reads at the end of my training ride and, of course, how I feel. So I know right now for the last 2.5 months that my training's been about spot on for a guy who's retired, 52 years of age, and, of course, has 2 kids still at home, and there's home duties and, you know, honeydew stuff to do here at the house. So there's only so much I can expect to get. But when I look at my power meter of 235 watts at the end of today's ride and how I feel at this moment, it's a really good sign. Now, if you have a coach, what he'd want to see too is you throw in that heart rate and then he can tell exactly how you're feeling too. So you clarify that language between you and the coach of, well, I just felt good. I just felt great. I felt fantastic. I felt amazing. They got all these words to explain different things, but it's not always, that word doesn't always mean the same thing to your coach, but math is universal, right? So go out and get yourself a power meter, learn how to use it, enjoy it, get the benefits out of it. But remember, it's always you training and the power meter telling you how your training's going, not the power meter training you. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.